Okay, I'm taking the front blower motor off. It goes to the upper, they call it the upper blower, upper complex, so we'll talk about the lower one a little later. There's a brass nut on here. I loosened it already. It's usually not that tight. You can hold the fan and unscrew it. And in this fan, there's a compression fitting, and it usually doesn't fit on there very tight, but work it off carefully so that you don't damage the plastic. Inside here, I already took off these. You never know what you find in old Rolls Royce. You see the thickness of that washer? This washer is what should be in there, and the diameter is much smaller in the hole, so I'm going to replace those when I put it back. And they fit on there and lock it down a lot better. But anyway, after you get the nuts off, and the wrong washers in this case, you pull this on out. The other thing is there is no seal in that, and there should be a grommet or a seal there. Yeah, somebody's replaced this, and as you spin it, you can hear a tickety tickety tick, and it's pretty rough. Hope you can hear that. So anyway, we're going to take this thing apart, clean it up, and see if it needs new brushes or not. Okay, one of the next things I did is I cut back this old sheeting with just a pair of scissors, slipping it under and cutting it up there. And now I'm going to take the nuts off the end here and slip the cover off. Before I actually slip the cover off, I'm going to clean the shaft off a little bit so I don't damage the bushings inside it. I'm going to take the nuts, and there's a lock washer on there, what I call an inner star washer rather than an outer star washer as such. But when I say clean this shaft off, I'm going to take a little piece of paper here. I'm going to get and see if this motor will actually run, and I'm going to put this paper up there and clean that off. You can hear that motor running. It's kind of running a little rough to me. It's not got the speed it should. But anyway, I'm going to take that sample. Oh, there it's a little faster. It's speeding up on me. Okay, it's probably been a while since it's run, but that's a good sign that it does work. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and remove that cover. Now you can see it slides off there pretty easily. You can see inside that it's pretty dirty. Contacts are up there. We got some corrosion over here. There's been some water in there, so we'll see what it takes to clean it up. There's a spring on each side. There should be a washer on each side, which there is. These bolts pull on out, and you'll note there is a spacer in there. It's plastic. The knurled edge of it goes on the downside. What I call the downside is where the shaft isn't. So I'm going to pull that one out, get that spacer out. Now the next thing is I'm going to check this armature, but it actually looks like we got quite a bit of contacts left here on the brushes. But in here you can see it's quite dirty on the armature. And man, we got some stuff over here that looks like mold or whatever. Now the first thing I usually do is I pull these out a little, and they'll pull up a little bit if you pull on them. They're a little tight, but you can get a hold of them and work them out there. And the reason I do that is I don't want to pull them off this top plate. If you do pull them off, they can be resoldered on. Boy, that one's a booger to get out. But anyway, I pull them up a little bit. Okay, and I'm getting them up enough here as such that I can pull the whole body out. And now this whole body here should come out of there. I'm going to take the armature with it. Oh boy, she's tight, but if you work it out, you can usually get it out, and that armature just really doesn't want to come out of there. There we go. Okay, so we got the armature out. You can see how dirty that is. We'll clean that up, and there's some crap there on the back that's questionable. We'll get that off of there. Excuse my language. Try to make these so they are viewable by children. Now there's going to be a couple of spacers on here, and in this one you can see, boy, that one came off there. Okay, so one came off on the shaft, but there should be two on the back side of these. And sure enough, the other one doesn't want to come out of there, but there, we got it. Okay, so there should be a couple of those, and that's actually a little bell shape to that has a tendency to press it out. And this particular one looks like it's got three. So there's the third one. Okay. So we got three out of that side, and you want to keep note of those. And there should be one out of the front side, and there it is, one out of the front side. And that's kind of a press, what I call a press washer. It's got a little bevel to it. So I'm going to lay those back, and we'll get those cleaned up. Oh, I'll be darned, there's two on the front. They put those in there for spacing, and on different motors, sometimes you get different numbers. So you just need to keep track of them. So there's two in front and three in back. And we'll get this cleaned up. We'll paint it a little bit, and then we'll talk about putting it back together. And while we got this out, you can see there's still plenty of brushes left. If you don't have the brushes, and by the way, when the brushes come out, there's going to be two springs. And those come out, and those set in the sides there. And that's basically a disassembly of the motor. Now we'll get this cleaned up, and there's some felt usually in here, or some oil retaining, and we'll put a couple of drops of oil in there to make sure it's lubricated over time. We'll do the same back in here. While we got this opening like this, if there's any places that are questionable, I take a little bit of liquid tape, and here's what I use right here. I use a liquid tape, and I'll cover up any places that look a little bare, or a little, if the wires are pulling out of the windings or whatever. You know, maybe one of the wires is cracked. I'll either replace it and solder a new one on, or I'll do the easy thing and cover it up with liquid tape, which seems to work well. Okay, just to make sure, I'm going to change some of these wires and solder them so they're the correct colors. These were replacements put in someplace along the line. But the fresh air blower, I don't know if you can see this, it should have a black and a yellow wire coming out of it. The yellow will be off the one that goes to the coils and then to the brushes, so I know which ones. And I went ahead on these, and I put a little yellow here and a little black there, a little B for black. And then I'm going to take these and cut them off. Whoever's put these on, we're going to get rid of them and put the correct colors, at least as they come out from underneath the sheathing. It'll make me feel better anyway. So we got all that disconnected now, and we'll get these cleaned up and painted. Okay, on the inside of this, and I've seen this on some of them, there's a piece of wax paper there. I think it's supposed to seal up and help keep the water out. What it has a tendency to do, what I've seen, is it collects water behind it, and then you start getting rust and corrosion. So I never put those back in, right, wrong, or different. Some people may not agree with me, but what the hell. Okay, I've used a little emery cloth to wrap around there and to clean that surface off there, and you know, you can get it fairly clean, but there are going to be little ridges in it worn by the brushes, but that's clean enough for me. And I'm also going to clean this shaft off here to make sure our front, and we didn't clean any. We cleaned the out part when we were running it, but we didn't clean there where the The bushing actually runs because we couldn't get to that as we cleaned the front off. So anyway, I like to clean those off real good, and I'll oil them before I put them back in the bushing so there's not metal to metal contact. Additionally, I prefer a lacquer thinner to clean things up, and I usually just use a paper towel or a shop rag. Get a little on there, and boy, it cleans this stuff up pretty good. Surprising thing is the paint on these aren't worth a crap. I went over this one, and it took most of the paint off, so I don't know what kind of paint was on there, but it wasn't. I was going to blast them, but looks like I can clean them up pretty good with just lacquer thinner. Okay, I did a little taping here before I paint. I put a little tape over here because it's a pain in the ass if you get paint down in your brass bearing surfaces. And I put a piece of tape on the inside and where the actual shaft comes out. I don't care if some goes through the holes and gets out on the inner part. The other thing too is I lightly tape this because I don't want this tape to get on the windings and the cloth or the paper, which is usually paper and shellac around the windings. So I just put it real loosely so I can get it off. The other thing is I don't want to have tape on something like a brush and pull it off when I take it out. So anyway, I'm going to paint these surfaces and then we'll get back to putting it together. Okay, while I'm letting the paint dry on those, let's talk about paint a little bit. You know, I use rattle cans for this. I hate cleaning up my spray gun and stuff, and I like using this chassis roll bar. I use a gloss bat. You know, it's good for a good temperature, but it's made to be underneath a car. It's self-priming, rust and corrosion resistance, so I don't get too carried away about my painting on the stuff, and I also don't have to prime with this, so probably a lot of people have different opinions on paints, but that's what I use anyway. Okay, I got my stuff painted here, and first of all, I talked about taking this wax shield out. There were pieces of it up in the windings and stuff, but if you really want to replace it, I'd just cut a duplicate. I stole this out of my wife's kitchen, but it's just wax paper, and it's the same kind of stuff, but truly, I don't put them back in. Some people may say that's a mistake, but I don't drive my car in a lot of weather and things like that. I'm going to talk about the brushes here, and you can get these brushes. This happens to be one for a door motor I needed. These were good, so I didn't get them to replace them. But you can buy these at most places that repair motors, starters, generators, that type of thing. We got a little shop out in the country outside of St. Louis that does that. If they don't quite fit into the plastic housing, they're easy to take a little piece of sandpaper and you can shape them a little bit very easily to fit in. So you get one close, and they all have the tab which you can solder on to your contacts. What I'm going to do here first is I'm going to use my old SIG grease, and I'm going to get it down here, and I'm going to put a little bit on the armature here so that I don't have to worry about it. Some people use 3-in-1 oil. I don't like the way it flows through this thing, so I use this grease. Okay, so I got my grease out, and I'm going to coat that real good. I put some down in the hole here, and I'm also going to take some, and I'm careful not to get it here where we cleaned up, but just a touch here where this is going to ride on the bearing. This has actually got a thrower here to keep the grease and crap off the windings, so I'm going to go clean my hands up before I touch the rest of this. Okay, I'm back with clean hands. Okay, first I'm going to insert this in here like such and make sure it spins freely, and it does. The second thing I'm going to do is I'm going to tape, put my springs in for the brushes, and I'm going to get the spring in the hole. And then I'm going to take a piece of tape, and I'm going to tape back the brushes so that they are easy to deal with as I got that in there. By the way, if you notice, these brushes came out one way, but I'm going to put that back in there, and with that wire you can take a little piece of tape, and I find that's the easiest way to hold them in. I'll pull that off later. I'll get the other one done so when I drop it through the armature I won't have to worry about getting the brushes caught or damaged. They'll slip right down, and then they'll when I pull the tape off they'll go in and go on to the armature.